In 1886, a group of land buyers changed the name of a small California settlement to Los Angeles. The words mean the angels. These men sold empty dirt plots to people living in cold eastern cities. They promised a warm place where anyone could own a house. This was not just a sales trick. It became the foundation of the city. Millions of people believed this promise. They moved west. Now, people look at Los Angeles and ask a different question. Why is a city built on the promise of cheap housing becoming a place where normal people cannot afford to live? To understand this change, we must look at the numbers. In the year 1900, only 102,000 people lived in Los Angeles. By 1930, the population grew to 1.2 million. The city added over 1 million people in 30 years. This fast growth forced city planners to make quick choices. They chose to spread out. They built wide roads. They gave land to builders who made small houses. Los Angeles became a giant web of streets. People needed cars to move around. This created the first expectation of the Los Angeles lifestyle. A person could have a quiet house with a yard. They did not have to share walls with neighbors. This expectation became the rule. But a rule built on endless space has a hidden flaw. Los Angeles does not have endless space. It has mountains on the east and north. It has the Pacific Ocean on the west and south. The land stops. Yet the expectation of a detached house continued. During 1930s, the Homeowners Loan Corporation drew maps of Los Angeles. They colored neighborhoods. Green meant safe for banks to give loans. Red meant dangerous. They marked areas with Black, Mexican, and Asian residents in red. Banks refused to give loans to anyone in red areas. This created two different realities in the same city. White residents in green areas got money to buy big houses. Residents in red areas got nothing. They could not buy homes. They could not build wealth. But there was another result. The red areas were mostly in the center of the city. A specific neighborhood called Boyle Heights was marked red. The green areas were on the edges. Banks paid builders to make houses in the green areas. This pushed the city outward. It kept the center of the city from growing taller or denser. The rules of money told builders to make single-family houses. Apartments were seen as risky. The expectation of a house with a yard was no longer just a preference. It was a financial rule forced by the government. After World War II ended in 1945, the pressure on the land increased. Millions of soldiers came home. They needed places to live. The federal government gave them loans to buy houses. Los Angeles grew fast again. Builders bought huge pieces of land in the San Fernando Valley. They built thousands of houses in a few months. In 1950, the population was 1.97 million. By 1960, it was 2.47 million. By 1970, it reached 2.81 million. The city built roads to connect these new houses to jobs. The 1950s saw the creation of the massive freeway system. The Santa Monica Freeway opened in 1951. The Harbor Freeway opened in 1953. The Golden State Freeway opened in 1955. These freeways made people feel free. A person could live 20 miles from their job and drive there in 20 minutes. This feeling of freedom hid a growing problem. The city was running out of empty land close to the center. Developers had to build further away. Builders named places like Panorama City and West Hills. These places were far from the main downtown area. People accepted the long drive because gas was cheap and roads were empty. The lifestyle expectation was now set in stone. A good life in Los Angeles meant a single-family house. It meant driving a car to work, to the store, and to the beach. This expectation ignored the basic math of city growth. A city can only spread out until it hits a wall. The wall came in the 1970s. The price of oil went up around the world. Gas became expensive. The freeways started to fill up. Driving 20 miles took an hour. At the same time, the price of houses started to rise faster than people's pay. In 1970, the average house in Los Angeles cost about $34,000. The average worker made enough to buy that house. By 1978, the average house price jumped to $85,000. Pay did not jump that high. People felt a squeeze. They paid more for gas. They paid more for a place to live. The dream was starting to crack. Into this moment of stress walked a man named Howard Jarvis. Jarvis was an older man. He made his money in the newspaper business. He was angry about property taxes. In the 1970s, the state of California reassessed home values every year. As house prices went up, the tax bill went up. In some cases, property taxes took 3% of a home's value each year. Older people on fixed incomes could not pay their tax bills. The state took their houses. Jarvis started a group. He wanted to stop the tax increases. He wrote a new law. It became known as Proposition 13. Proposition 13 did something simple. It capped the property tax rate at 1% of the home's purchase price. It also said the assessed value could only go up 2% a year. The tax bill would stay low until the house was sold. Jarvis gathered signatures. He talked to angry homeowners at grocery stores. He promised to save their homes. The vote happened in June 1978. The result shook the entire state. 4.2 million voters said yes. 2.9 million voters said no. 65% of voters approved the law. Proposition 13 became law. Homeowners cheered. They felt safe. But this celebration hit a massive shift in how Los Angeles would operate. The new law would change who could live in the city forever. The contrast between the intention and the result is shocking. Voters wanted to protect older homeowners. The law did that. But Proposition 13 changed the math for city governments. Cities in California relied on property taxes to pay for police, fire departments, and roads. Overnight, that money was cut. Los Angeles County lost $1.2 billion in property tax revenue in the first year alone. The city leaders had to find new money. They looked at the rules of Proposition 13. The law kept property taxes low, but it did not limit sales taxes. Cities realized a harsh truth. A new house with a family brought very little tax money because of the property tax cap. A new shopping mall brought massive sales tax money. This realization changed the building rules of Los Angeles. Cities stopped wanting new houses. They wanted shopping centers. They wanted auto dealerships. They wanted big box stores. If a city approved a new neighborhood of 50 houses, the city lost money on police and fire services for those houses. If a city approved a new car dealership, the city made money. This created a dangerous situation. The population of Los Angeles was still growing. People still needed places to live, but the local governments made it very hard to build new homes. Builders had to ask for permission. The cities said no. The cities rezoned land. They took land meant for houses and changed the rules so only stores could be built there. The consequences took a few years to show up. In 1980, the median price of a home in Los Angeles was $110,000. By 1985, it jumped to $165,000. By 1989, it hit $215,000. The prices went up because the supply of houses stopped growing, but the number of people who wanted to live there kept rising. Another law made it worse. In 1970, Governor Ronald Reagan signed a law called the California Environmental Quality Act. People call it CEQA. The law said builders had to study how a project would affect the air, water, and traffic. The goal was good. It was meant to stop pollution. But in the 1980s, people who already owned homes used CEQA as a weapon. If a builder proposed an apartment building, the people in the single-family houses next door would sue. They claimed the apartment building would cause too much traffic. They claimed it would block the sun. The lawsuits delayed buildings for years. A single citizen could file a lawsuit and halt a 50-unit apartment building for 18 months. Builders had to spend millions of dollars on lawyers. Many builders just gave up. They took their money to other states where it was easier to build. Why would people who lived in nice houses stop new houses from being built? The answer lies in human nature and money. If a city allows a lot of new houses to be built, the price of existing houses goes down. A homeowner's biggest investment is their house. They wanted the price of their house to go up. By stopping new apartments, they protected their own wealth. They used environmental laws to hide their financial motives. They claimed to care about traffic and trees. They really cared about their bank accounts. This created a closed circle. The people inside the circle had cheap taxes and rising home values. The people outside the circle could not get in. Look at the numbers from the 1980s. The city of Los Angeles added 500,000 new jobs in that decade. The businesses were growing. The economy was strong. But the city only approved 100,000 new housing units. This is a massive mismatch. Every new job usually means a new person looking for a place to live. The city welcomed the workers. The city refused to build homes for them. This forced the workers to compete for the small number of old houses and apartments. Rent prices started a slow, painful climb. The contrast is clear. Los Angeles was a place of opportunity for businesses. It was a place of rejection for workers looking for a home. The mayor of Los Angeles during this time was Tom Bradley. Bradley was the first black mayor of the city. He served from 1973 to 1993. Bradley wanted Los Angeles to be a world-class city. He brought the 1984 Summer Olympics to the city. He helped build massive skyscrapers downtown. He brought new jobs to the area. But Bradley could not force the city to build homes. The city council members controlled the zoning rules. The city council members listened to the people who already lived in the neighborhoods. Those people voted. Those people said no to apartments. Bradley pushed for new housing, but the system blocked him at every turn. The clash between lifestyle expectations and reality became clear in the late 1980s. A young person graduating from college in 1988 wanted what their parents had. They wanted a house with a yard. They wanted a two-car garage. But the math no longer worked. A young teacher or a young nurse made about $25,000 a year. A normal house cost over $200,000. Banks required a large down payment. The young workers could not save enough money. They had to rent. But the rent was going up too. In 1980, a nice one-bedroom apartment in a safe area cost $350 a month. By 1990, that same apartment cost $800 a month. The young generation was the first to feel the true cost of the housing shortage. This housing pressure created a ripple effect. People who could not afford houses in Los Angeles started moving further away. They moved to cities in the inland desert. They moved to places like Riverside and San Bernardino. These cities were 60 miles from downtown Los Angeles. The houses there were cheaper. But these people still had to work in Los Angeles. They had to drive. This set the stage for a new kind of daily suffering. The roads were not built for this many cars. In 1950, there was one car for every two people in Los Angeles. By 1985, there was one car for every 1.2 people. The freeways were about to break. To understand the traffic, we must look back at the freeways. In the 1950s, city planners drew lines on a map. These roads were marvels of engineering at the time. They moved cars very fast. But the planners made a huge mistake. They did not plan for the population to double. They did not plan for the fact that people would live 60 miles from their jobs. The freeways had a fixed limit. By the late 1980s, the cars on the road hit that limit. The contrast between the promise of the freeway and the reality of the commute is a defining feature of Los Angeles history. In 1960, a billboard stood next to the Harbor Freeway. It showed a happy family in a clean car. The words said a person could be there in 20 minutes. In 1988, a reporter for the Los Angeles Times drove that same route. It took him 2 hours and 15 minutes to go 12 miles. The freeway did not make people free. The freeway trapped people in their cars. The expectation of a fast drive was gone. The reality was a slow, painful crawl twice a day. The shock of the traffic jam changed how people lived their days. Workers had to leave their houses at 5 in the morning to beat the traffic. They came home at 7 at night. They had no time to enjoy the sunny weather that drew them to the city. They had no time to mow the yard they worked so hard to buy. The car became a dining room. People ate breakfast in their cars. They drank coffee in their cars. They listened to the radio to find out which bridges were blocked by crashes. The stress of the commute caused real health problems. Doctors in Los Angeles started seeing patients with high blood pressure directly linked to the long drives. There is a lesser-known fact about the traffic crisis. Los Angeles actually had a very good public train system in the early 1900s. It was called the Pacific Electric Railway. It had red train cars that went all over the city. By 1920, the system had over 1,000 miles of track. It went to the beaches, it went to the mountains. But in the 1940s and 1950s, a company called General Motors bought the train system. General Motors made buses. They tore up the train tracks, they put buses on the roads. By 1961, the last red train car stopped running. The buses got stuck in the exact same traffic as the cars. By the 1980s, the bus system was slow and unreliable. Only people who could not afford cars rode the buses. The city was stuck. The trains were gone. The roads were full. There was no way out. How does a city fix a problem this big? In 1980, voters in Los Angeles passed a new law. It was called Proposition A. It created a half-cent sales tax to pay for transportation. The law promised to raise $5 billion over 20 years. The money was supposed to build new train lines. People hoped the trains would fix the traffic, but building a train takes a long time. The city had to buy the land, they had to dig tunnels, they had to fight lawsuits from people who did not want train tracks near their houses. While the city waited for the trains, the traffic got worse every single year. The expectation of a quick fix met the slow reality of government work. The traffic and the housing prices were connected. The cost of living in Los Angeles was not just about rent, it was about the hidden costs. People paid for gas. People paid for car repairs because cars broke down on the bad freeways. People paid for parking. In 1985, parking downtown cost $3 a day. By 1990, it cost $12 a day. A worker making $30,000 a year might spend $5,000 a year just on transportation. This left very little money for food or savings. The lifestyle expectation of a relaxed California life was replaced by the reality of constant financial stress. A key figure who tried to warn the public about this was Yvonne Braithwaite Burke. She was a member of the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. In 1987, Burke wrote a report on the cost of living. She showed data that proved poor people spent a much larger part of their pay on bus fares and car repairs than rich people did. She called it a hidden tax on the poor. She fought for better bus service. She fought for lower bus fares. But the transit agency needed money. They raised the bus fare from 50 cents to $1. This pushed the poorest workers deeper into poverty. The late 1980s brought the climax of this housing and traffic clash. The city was rich on paper. The banks were full. The movie studios were making billions of dollars. The ports were shipping goods all over the world. But the normal workers who kept the city running were being pushed out. A police officer could not afford to buy a house in the city he protected. A nurse could not afford to live near the hospital where she worked. In 1989, the median household income in Los Angeles was $35,000. The median home price was $215,000. A bank would only lend a family about $100,000 on that income. The gap between the rich and the poor became a physical gap. The rich lived near the ocean in Santa Monica or in the hills of Bel Air. The poor lived in the crowded apartments in the center of the city, or they drove 2 hours from the desert. The city was breaking apart by geography. The contrast was visible from the air. If you flew over Los Angeles in 1970, you saw a flat, spread-out city. The houses looked equal. The pools looked the same. If you flew over Los Angeles in 1990, you saw sharp lines. You saw the wealthy areas with thick green trees and big houses. You saw the poor areas with small gray apartment buildings packed next to each other. There was no blending. The rules put in place in the 1930s and 1970s had sorted the city by money. The expectation that everyone could have a piece of the California sun was dead. At the end of the 1980s, The workers who could not afford the high rent in Los Angeles had to go somewhere. They did not vanish. They moved into their cars. They moved into cheap motels. They moved onto the streets. To understand how a modern American city allowed thousands of people to sleep on the sidewalk, we must look at a specific date. The date is October 11th, 1967. On this day, Governor Ronald Reagan signed a law called the Lanterman-Petrus Short Act. This law has a hidden history that most people do not know. Before this law, the state of California could force a person with a mental illness into a hospital. The state could keep them there for a long time. The hospitals were often dirty. The patients had no freedom. Advocates for the disabled fought to change this. They wanted patients to have rights. They wanted people to live in normal communities. The new law stopped the state from holding people against their will unless they were a danger to themselves or others. The contrast between the goal of the law and the result is shocking. The lawmakers wanted to free patients from bad hospitals. The lawmakers did not build the community clinics to help these patients once they were free. The state closed the large mental hospitals. Between 1969 and 1985, California closed 5 state hospitals. The state let 14,000 patients leave. The expectation was that local counties would pay for small clinics and group homes. But the counties did not have the money. The patients left the hospitals. They had no money, they had no family to take them in, they had no medical care. Many of these former patients stopped taking their medicine. They became confused. They wandered the streets of Los Angeles. The promise of freedom became a life of public suffering. This created a curiosity that troubles city planners to this day. How does a rich state forget to care for its sickest citizens? The problem grew worse because of a second change in the housing market. In the 1970s, the center of Los Angeles had thousands of very cheap hotels. People called them single-room occupancy hotels, or SROs. These hotels rented tiny rooms. A room had a bed and a sink. The rooms did not have kitchens. People shared bathrooms in the hallway. In 1970, there were about 20,000 of these cheap rooms in downtown Los Angeles. A poor worker could rent a room for $10 a week. It was not a nice life, but it was a roof. A person could lock a door. In the late 1970s, city leaders wanted to clean up downtown. They wanted to attract rich businesses. They passed new building codes. The new codes said the old hotels were not safe. The codes demanded that the hotel owners install new fire escapes and new plumbing. The owners did not want to spend the money. Instead of fixing the hotels, the owners knocked them down. By 1985, the city had lost 10,000 of these cheap rooms. The city did not build new cheap rooms to replace them. The math is simple and cruel. The state let thousands of sick people out of hospitals. The city destroyed thousands of cheap rooms. The streets became the only option left. A key figure in this change was Police Chief Daryl Gates. Gates led the Los Angeles Police Department from 1978 to 1992. In 1976, before he became chief, Gates wrote a special policy for the police. The policy was about homeless people. Gates believed that homeless people scared tourists and hurt businesses. He did not want homeless people in the wealthy parts of the city. He did not want them near the beaches. He did not want them in the shopping districts. Gates created a plan called containment. The police were told to arrest homeless people for minor crimes. The police would then drive the homeless people to a specific area and drop them off. That area was a neighborhood called Skid Row. Skid Row is just east of the main downtown buildings. It covers about 50 city blocks. The police made a rule. If a homeless person was found sleeping in Santa Monica or Hollywood, the police would put them in a car and drive them to Skid Row. The contrast is clear. The city spent millions of dollars to keep the west side of Los Angeles perfectly clean for wealthy buyers. The city ignored the east side. Skid Row became a holding pen for human beings. The shock is in the numbers. By 1990, there were over 10,000 homeless people living in a few square blocks of Skid Row. The sidewalks were so full of tents and cardboard boxes that people had to walk in the street. While the homeless crisis grew on the streets, a different kind of crisis grew inside normal apartments. The cost of living in Los Angeles was rising faster than paychecks. In 1980, a worker at a factory made about $9 an hour. The price of a gallon of milk was $2. The price of a loaf of bread was 50 cents. By 1990, the factory worker made $11 an hour. The pay went up a little, but the price of milk went up to $2.80. The price of bread went up to $1.30. Rent went up much faster. A family needed 2 incomes to survive. A husband and wife both had to work. This created a new expectation. People thought if they worked hard at 2 jobs, they would be safe. The reality was different. If a person got sick and missed 2 weeks of work, they could not pay the rent. There was no safety net. A turning point came in the early 1990s that pushed thousands more families into poverty. In 1989, the Cold War between America and the Soviet Union ended. The threat of global nuclear war went away. This was good for the world. It was a disaster for Los Angeles. The economy of Los Angeles depended heavily on building weapons for the military. The aerospace industry was the biggest employer in the region. Companies like Lockheed, McDonnell Douglas, and Rockwell employed over 300,000 people in Southern California. When the Cold War ended, the government stopped buying as many weapons. The companies fired their workers. In 1990, the defense cuts started. By 1993, the aerospace industry in Los Angeles lost 120,000 jobs. These were good jobs. An engineer at Lockheed made $60,000 a year. A factory worker made $40,000 a year. These people bought houses, they bought cars, they spent money at local stores. When they lost their jobs, they stopped spending money. The shock of the aerospace crash rippled through the whole city. A person who lost a $60,000 job could not find another job that paid the same amount. They had to take a job at a grocery store for $15,000 a year. They could not pay their mortgage. The banks took their houses. The foreclosure rate in Los Angeles tripled between 1990 and 1993. Entire neighborhoods in the San Fernando Valley suffered. The San Fernando Valley was the place where the aerospace workers lived. It was the place where the American dream felt real in the 1970s. By 1993, the streets of the valley were full of for sale signs. The expectations of the workers clashed with the new reality. They thought their skills were valuable forever. They thought their houses were safe. The global shift in politics destroyed their local economy in just 3 years. How does a city survive when its biggest industry disappears? The answer is that the city did not survive intact. The city fractured further. The cost of living did not drop when the jobs disappeared. This is a cruel rule of economics. Rents stay high because the landlords still have to pay their own bills. Property taxes stayed low for the landlords because of Proposition 13. The landlords did not have to lower the rent to survive. They just waited for new tenants who had money. But the new tenants with money were not coming to Los Angeles in 1992. The city was seen as dangerous. The city was seen as too expensive. The only people moving to Los Angeles were poor immigrants from Mexico and Central America. They came to work in the remaining low-wage jobs. They cleaned houses, they washed dishes, they worked in clothing factories. These workers needed places to live. They crowded into the old apartments that the aerospace workers had left behind. In some cases, 10 people lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. They slept in shifts. This kept the cost of living high for everyone. The overcrowding put a massive strain on the city infrastructure. The water pipes broke more often. The power grids failed. The schools could not handle the number of new students. The city services were falling apart just as the people needed them most. The clash between lifestyle expectations and reality hit its peak in the spring of 1992. For years, the poor neighborhoods of South Central Los Angeles had been ignored by the city government. The roads had holes, the streetlights were broken, the police treated the residents with anger. The residents were mostly Black and Latino. They watched the wealthy parts of the city get new parks and new police protection. They watched the cost of living rise while their wages stayed flat. The tension in the city was like a tight wire. It needed only one mistake to snap. That mistake happened on March 3, 1991. A man named Rodney King led the police on a high-speed chase. When the police caught him, they beat him badly. A man standing on a balcony filmed the beating. The video went on the national news. Everyone saw the violence. The Black community in Los Angeles expected the police officers to go to jail. The trial for the officers was moved to a white, wealthy suburb called Simi Valley. On April 29, 1992, the jury announced their decision. They said the police officers were not guilty. The contrast between the expectation of justice and the verdict caused a shock that shook the world. The anger in South Central Los Angeles exploded. People took to the streets. They did not just protest, they burned buildings, they broke windows, they stole goods from stores. The riots lasted for 6 days. The violence spread from South Central to other parts of the city. The police chief, Daryl Gates, did not know how to stop it. He waited too long to call for help. The governor called in the National Guard. The military brought tanks and soldiers with rifles. By the time the riots stopped, 63 people were dead. Over 2,000 people were hurt. The damage to buildings cost $1 billion. The riots were not just about the police verdict. They were about years of economic pain. They were about the high cost of living. They were about the lack of hope. When a reporter asked a young man why he was stealing a television, the young man said he did not care. He said he had no job, no house, and no future. The expectation of the American dream was a lie to him. He wanted to destroy the city that had ignored him. The consequences of the 1992 riots changed the physical shape of Los Angeles. Thousands of businesses burned down. These were the grocery stores, the banks, and the pharmacies that the poor neighborhoods needed. After the fires went out, the business owners did not come back. They took their insurance money and moved to safer areas. This created a new reality for the residents. They had to travel further to buy food. They had to pay higher prices at the few stores that remained. The cost of living went up again for the poorest people. The city tried to fix the damage. The federal government sent money to rebuild, but the rebuilding took years. In some places, the empty lots from 1992 stayed empty for a decade. The riots pushed more middle-class Black families out of Los Angeles. They moved to Atlanta. They moved to Houston. They went to cities where houses were cheaper and jobs were easier to find. Los Angeles lost a huge part of its middle class. The city became a place of very rich people and very poor people. The middle ground disappeared. By the mid-1990s, the unlivable nature of Los Angeles was a solid fact. A person working a minimum wage job in 1995 made $4.25 an hour. They made $340 for a full week of work. The rent for a one-bedroom apartment in a normal neighborhood was $700 a month. The math is impossible. A worker could not pay for rent and food on that wage. The city created a large class of working poor. These people worked 40 hours a week. They dressed in clean clothes. They went to work every day. But they lived in crowded apartments. They ate cheap food. They could not go to the doctor when they were sick. They lived one missed paycheck away from joining the people on Skid Row. The lifestyle expectation of Los Angeles was a sunny beach and a relaxed dinner. The reality was a long drive in traffic, a crowded bus, and a tiny room. The traffic, the housing prices, the homeless camps, and the cost of living all mixed together into a heavy weight. People felt this weight every day. The city was no longer a place of freedom, it was a place of rules and walls. Gated communities became popular in the 1990s. Wealthy people built literal walls around their neighborhoods. They hired private security guards. They put spikes on their fences. They did this because the public police could not keep them safe. The contrast is very clear here. In the 1950s, people in Los Angeles left their front doors open. They did not lock their cars. In 1995, people locked everything. They bought expensive alarm systems for their houses. They carried keys for 3 different locks on their apartment doors. The loss of trust was a direct result of the economic stress. When people cannot afford to live, they become desperate. Crime goes up, fear goes up. The city spent more money on prisons than on schools. The state of California built 23 new prisons between 1982 and 2000. During that same time, the state built only 1 new university campus. The priority was to lock people away, not to educate them or house them. The expectation of the Los Angeles lifestyle included green grass and swimming pools. To keep the grass green, the city needed water. Los Angeles is a desert. It gets very little rain. In the early 1900s, the city stole water from the Owens Valley, 200 miles away. By the 1990s, that water was not enough. The city had to buy water from other states. The price of water went up. In 1991, the city of Los Angeles passed a law to force people to use less water. People could only water their grass on certain days. If they broke the rule, they got a fine. The fine was $200. This was a shock to the homeowners. They bought a house with a yard. Now the city told them the yard was a waste of water. The lifestyle expectation clashed with the physical reality of the desert. The cost of living included the cost of water. A family in the San Fernando Valley saw their water bill double between 1985 and 1995. They paid more for less water. The story of Los Angeles from 1970 to 1995 is a story of choices. The city chose to stop building apartments. The city chose to protect cheap property taxes. The city chose to let the cheap hotels burn or get knocked down. The city chose to push sick people into a small downtown zone. The city chose to build weapons instead of diverse industries. Every choice had a consequence. The consequence was a city that stopped working for normal people. The promise of 1886, the promise of a cheap house in the sun, was dead. In its place was a harsh reality. The reality was traffic that never moved. The reality was rent that took half of a person's paycheck. The reality was sidewalks lined with tents. The reality was a fear that the next earthquake or the next riot would destroy everything a person had saved. By the late 1990s, the people who could leave left. The population of Los Angeles stopped growing. The people who stayed had to adapt to the new rules of survival. They accepted the traffic. They accepted the high prices. They accepted the walls and the alarms. But a deep sadness hung over the city. The historians of the future will look back at the late 20th century and see a clear turning point. They will see a city that had every advantage. It had a perfect climate. It had a massive port. It had the entertainment industry. It had space. But it failed to provide the most basic human need. It failed to provide a safe, affordable place for a worker to sleep at night. The door to the past closed. The challenges of the future waited just around the corner.